She's Faith.
He's Justice.
And together we make up the Justice and Faith podcast and YouTube channel.
Yeah. I apologize for our last video not having audio. Hopefully this time we have all the kinks worked out and it'll be good. We did link the audio to the video, so if you want to go back and listen to it, you can, because we're starting off from part 2 here. We're not going to go back and redo it.
And the audio is via podcast on Spotify and Anchor and a few other outlets. We're still trying to get a hold of every outlet that it went to, but Spotify, Anchor, and there might be a version on Facebook too, but if you don't get it, don't worry about it, because the good stuff is coming in this episode.
Yes.
To be honest with you.
So basically, in episode 1, we talked about us and how we met and how we grew up and like a little bit of just backstory on us, and we got kind of all the way up through our
beginning of our
the first part of our first marriage.
Yeah.
And we're kind of coming into when we get divorced. So where do you want to start? You can go ahead and get started.
So pretty much where I left off was pretty much more work than we thought, and the marriage. We both had specific ideas and ideals that we went by, and the foundation that we tried to build everything on is God. However, we're still men, but we're still human, sins of the flesh and things like that. So we still had things we wanted as people that wasn't necessarily based off scripture, like love and happiness and all of those things that we wanted to balance out correctly that wasn't happening for me specifically. So I'm just going to talk about my piece up until that point. So like I said, about 9 months in, I was struggling within our marriage. I'm not sure whether Faith was aware or not. Maybe.
I knew you were upset, but I had no idea why. I had no idea how to fix it. I had no idea what I was doing personally to make it worse. I knew you were upset and it was making me upset, but I didn't know anything about how to fix it.
And I didn't know.
It was very trying for me as well.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to say anything anymore. Like, so more backstory on this. We were in marriage counseling the entirety of our marriage and before we were married.
Mm-hmm.
This was an issue simply because, and if anybody's thinking about going into couples counseling, I am a proponent of, if you're a person of faith, if you're a like me, but if you're a person like a Christian and you have a church home and you want to go and get counseling through them, then I'm all for it. But I do feel that you should go to a professional whose primary job is marriage and family counseling, because they're going to tell you things and say things to you that are going to help you on the outside of it. So when we were going, everything went back to the scripture. And mind you, let me tell you something. When I was 27, I didn't understand some things about the Bible, specifically the New Testament and grace. I grew up fire and brimstone, Old Testament, Revelations, Psalms. That's what I stayed in. Mm-hmm. So as I started learning more, I started getting in and looking specifically for marriage-related things. So I really tried to always bring things back to those points within our marriage and our relationship. It didn't go over well in the household. I'm not quite sure why. So that frustrated me even more. So I wanted to give that backstory so you can understand exactly. I thought I was doing everything that I could to try to get through to my wife. But honestly, what it came down to is she wasn't equipped enough to deal with the issues and the demons and the baggage that I brought just from my life. There was trauma and things that I had already dealt with that I hadn't fully processed and fully dealt with. And we both got married young. And when I say young, I don't mean age-wise. I mean mentally. Yeah. Mentally and emotionally and spiritually.
First time I was 26. You were 27?
I'm not talking about age. What I'm talking about...
Well, no. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, to give perspective. We were both in our 20s. Now we're both in our 30s. So, go ahead.
I was making a point about, like, mental age.
I know.
So, you threw off my whole thing.
Okay.
But what I'm talking about is that we were very young, and I was in my infancy in my spiritual walk, not because I hadn't grown up in churches and been around. It was because it was the first time I solidly looked at something, I understood it, and it was like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
And up until that point, so I was opposite. I was in my infancy when it comes to like life. and problems and like real things, because my whole life was very sheltered. In part one, I went into the fact that I was in a Christian conservative family. I was homeschooled, like a whole bunch of stuff, working. Like, it made me who I am. I have my values because of it. I'm not saying that I would change it necessarily. But when push came to shove and I needed to like have some life stuff, life understanding, life knowledge, that kind of thing, to be the wife he needed, then I didn't have it. It just wasn't there. I had nothing to draw from, no like life experience, no nothing to like reference or whatever. I didn't even have really any family or anything adjacent to my world that could have prepared me for my first marriage with Justice.
Which is always odd to talk about, like how we ended up with each other, just because we are so vastly different. But yeah, so getting back to like, so we're having a lot of problems. We're having struggle. Well, I want to say me. I don't want to say we, but it was getting to a point where we were arguing, we were fighting almost every day, and it was about dumb stuff. And I believe a lot of couples out there, they have fights about dumb stuff. But I just remember it came to a point one week where I don't remember what had happened. She was at work, and I was staring at this thing. Her dad made this triangle, and on the triangle, it was her on one side, me on one side, and God was at the top. So if you look behind, well, you can't really see behind this, but I redid that particular triangle for us because I loved it. And it was something I always pointed to whenever we got into an argument. I'm just like, hey, we're supposed to both be moving closer to God. Like, sometimes I felt like I was moving closer and she wasn't because she was so stubborn. And that, it was a very odd thing because I would go to the Bible. Like, whenever we had an argument, I would go to the Bible and say, the scripture says this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And you're supposed to be doing. And I don't even know if she would respond, really. I think she would just kind of like scoff and go about her business. And to me, I was just like, well, nothing I've done in my past is going to work because no life experience and stuff like that. Using the scripture in the Bible is not working. And I was at wit's end. So I remember calling her father. And I said, can she come stay with you guys for a week? I don't remember that full conversation, but I think it was like, yeah, you know, sometimes you need a little bit of time apart or whatever. And she came home and I said, I don't know if I asked and said you need, or I said you need to go to your parents for a week. I'm just going to say I said you need to go to your parents for a week. And what was your response?
No.
Yeah, it was no. And
yeah, I was like, that's not going to solve anything. Like, how are you going to solve something if you're not working on it? So that was my thought process.
And that became another. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Keep talking.
And that became another argument, and that one was the one that really sent me over the edge. So, the thing about me is I have a history. Well, I've always had a lot of females in my life. Just always had a lot of females in my life. I love talking to women. That's why I know so much about women. It gives me a different kind of vantage point than talking to men. Like, I have a lot of male friends, I have like brothers, but talking to them grates on me sometimes. Talking to women, for some reason, they listen differently because my perspective and a lot of the ways I think is like a woman. I process things and I think about things very deeply, but I merge emotion and logic, and now I'm trying to be more logical, but I've always merged emotion and logic, and a lot of times emotion overcame the logic because I'm a super emotional person at times. So when we were dealing with this, the first thing I was thinking was like, well, I want a female that's going to provide me what my wife wasn't. I didn't want a sexual relationship. I didn't want anything else. I just wanted a female friend to talk to. And so during this time, there are several women I spoke to and talked to, but this thing, and the conversations that would come up, it's like, wait a minute, you're married. And the moment people found out I was married, they wouldn't even talk to me anymore. And to me, I'm just like, well, damn, like I can't have a female friend. And apparently it was like, no. So I stopped saying that I was married, or I took my ring off sometimes to talk to people. It wasn't because I was trying to do anything outside of my marriage. It was just simply because I was trying to establish and build a relationship so people can get to know me and understand me before learning that I was married, to understand my intent. I think that some of the women that I talked to, they were kind of probably like, well, you know, you could be a potential, you know, whatever. And the fact that I'm married means, well, why am I wasting my time with you? Like, I don't really need a male friend. I'm looking for something more. Mm-hmm. Where I was looking for something different. I was looking for something less. So in a way, and I never really thought about it, like I guess I manipulated the situation because I wanted to find a female force to balance off what my wife wasn't giving me. And I ended up finding that, and then it ended up becoming more than what the intent was. And as I said, I did not say I was married right away, but I eventually said it, and the person was like, "Well, we can be friends," and whatever the case may be. But that's not exactly what happened because enamoration happened, and I started to check out of my marriage emotionally. I started to check out physically. It was a very odd thing to go through and experience where I felt like I was cheating on the other person by being with my wife, and it was because the lack of what my wife was able to provide for me at that time and what this other person did, it was very important for me from an emotional standpoint. So during this time, we continue to go to counseling and different things like that. And honest to God, and this is the honest to God truth, the only reason I continued to go to counseling was because I was trying to find something to kind of just like snap me back to my marriage. I was trying to find something that was going to go, like, hey, stay here. It's going to work out. Everything's going to be okay. And that's not what happened. Now, we pretty much always had great counseling sessions. Like, Pastor was great. We tended to learn a little bit more about each other, but what ended up happening was I still was dealing with this other person. And so I was still getting fed things that I wasn't getting fed at home. And so it was this conflict of the right thing versus what I want to do. And you can...
No, and it like... I think I found out about this other person pretty quickly, actually.
I told you.
Yeah, like he told me about her almost right away. So then, not only did I have to figure out what I was doing wrong in our relationship, now I had competition, which is how I looked at it. I'm like, okay, this other person is like better than me in X, Y, Z, all these ways. So I'm like, okay, so not only do I need to figure out what I'm doing wrong in our relationship aspect, our marriage, now I have to worry about what he's doing when he's not here. So not only am I trying to fix something like when we're together, but I'm worried constantly about what he's doing when we're not together. So, and whenever like we would go to counseling or we would do things, it was kind of like, oh, I always felt like it was just, like he was just biding time until we got divorced or we broke up so that he could be with this other person. Because at that point I just was like, okay, he likes her better than me. Like, and I know that sounds juvenile to put it that way, but that's kind of the way I was like, he doesn't like me anymore and he likes her. So it's like, okay, what can I do to like reverse this situation? So that was not a very fun point in my life.
And you tried to do a bunch of things very quickly to try to regain my attention.
Yeah, that's true. Like I was like, I tried to be like, okay, so if he needs this or that or the other thing, like try all these different things to see what I'm not doing that I can start doing and see if it's enough. Turns out it wasn't enough. So.
And it was only not enough because I've been in several relationships, long-term relationships, and I'll just use this one. My child's mother did something similar when we broke up, and she came back. I remember she picked up our daughter one day, and she said, now during this time, I had very rarely ever saw her in regular clothes, meaning she was in pajamas most of the time, or maybe scrubs, because she worked in a medical office. And I remember she came and picked up our daughter one day. She was suited and booted, had makeup on, and she had enrolled in nursing school. And I said, okay, but why now? And she said, because I want to prove to you that you lost out on something. And in my head, I was like, why do you feel like now is the time to try to enhance yourself? When we were together, and that was the expectation, you just wanted me to accept you as you were, which was a person who I didn't see really growing. And that was her mindset and her perspective. And literally after that, she started doing every single thing I had begged. And when I say beg, I mean I was so self-destructive during this time. I literally begged. I hurt myself. I did all types of things to try to gain this attention, and none of that stuff works. I'm like, breaking up with you, that is what caused you to do this. And then we ended up getting back together, and immediately she stopped doing all those things and went and reverted back to who she was. So when Faith,
the difference though for me was I wasn't trying to like get you back, or like, I don't know. I mean, I realized that you were slipping away, and I guess that was part of it, but it was like I wanted to show you that I could do the things that you needed me to do.
but would it have been consistent?
But the other thing I kind of come back to sometimes is I didn't know how to be a wife. Like, and I feel like I didn't, I mean, I know at this time it was like 9 months or whatever, but that's not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things to learn how to be a completely new person. So, like, that's another thing that I thought in the back of my head was, like, he didn't even give me enough time to figure it out.
Here's my rebuttal today. Remember when I met you? I had to change who I was immediately. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
I had to change who I was immediately. So the internal stuff started coming out when you didn't change as rapidly.
Yeah.
So the expectation, which was unfair, was that she would flip a switch like me, because as I said in the previous video, I felt that if somebody did certain things and they matched up a certain way, then that was going to be what promoted people moving forward the way that they needed to, and that's not what happened. And so then my demons and my problems started seeping out, because I'm like, I had to change everything, be this whole different person, and she got to just be her. She still got to dance, she got to do hair, everything that she loved, cared about, like her life. The only thing that changed about her life was me.
Yeah.
Me being there and me being an additional support where other people, I personally don't believe people supported her appropriately, and she just kind of coasted, and that was okay.
Yeah.
And then when I came into her life, it's like, you can do better, and it's like, oh well, like everybody said I did good enough, and I'm just like, and so that became problematic for me too. So was it unfair for me to have expectations of her within a year? I don't know. I'd argue with people with that, because I don't think my expectations were grandiose. I really don't. My internal stuff. Now, anybody that I've ever been with, my internal stuff is difficult to deal with, but it's my internal stuff. Me now, growing now, I'm able to deal more with my internal stuff. At that point, I didn't even recognize all the problems that I had.
Yeah.
And that brings us to
Then we inevitably, unfortunately, got divorced.
We ended up getting divorced. Yeah.
I remember the day actually that we signed the papers, because there was a slight, like, 2-week period where I wasn't sure I was going to sign the papers, because technically if I didn't sign the papers, we would have just been married. Probably, I guess the technical term would have been separated, but still married. And he couldn't have, like, forced it for, I don't know, I read it was like a couple of years. He couldn't have forced the divorce for a while. So part of me was like, should I wait and not sign to see if maybe, like, he realizes that the grass isn't greener, and he, like, maybe we'll get back together, blah, blah, blah. But then the other part of me that eventually won out was, I don't want to put myself through that. Like, because then me being who I am, if I was still technically married, I wouldn't have been able to date anybody. I wouldn't have been able to, like, move on with my life, because I would have just looked at myself as still married. And because I would still be married and I know that he was with someone else, that would have been like, it just would have been bad all around. So I decided eventually, ultimately, to sign the papers. It was a couple days after Christmas. And I was like, well, it's good timing because New Year's is right around the corner. I can start fresh in the new year. But that's not what happened right away. I went into a pretty decent depression for a few months at least. I had to move back with my parents because I didn't make enough money to support myself. So I moved back with my parents, and it was everything I had to get out of bed, like every day for like months. All I did was literally get up, go to work, come home, and I was in bed like all day. Like, I didn't have a social life of any kind for at least, I want to say at least 5-6 months. Like, it was bad for a while. I didn't realize it was depression at first. Like, I thought I was just sad. But my mom, since I had moved back to my parents, she actually, at one point, she said she was starting to get worried about me. And she told me to start taking It was like a herbal thing, St. George.
St. John's wort.
Yeah, St. John's wort. It's supposed to help with your mood and stuff. So she told me to start taking that. And actually, I don't know if it was that or if it was just time. But I did start feeling a little bit better. Probably close to my birthday, which was June. And it's actually ironic because he and I had a little thing close to my birthday. Not like a real thing, but a little thing. Yeah, you came out for my birthday that year that we had been divorced. That was the flat tire incident. So yeah.
I forgot about that.
So yeah, it was really weird and random, but it was funny because it was 6 months after our divorce. It was my birthday. He came out. We went out to get a drink or something, and then we went somewhere else to talk, and we started kind of kissing-ish, but like it didn't go all, like
you spilling too much tea.
whatever. Yeah,
too much tea.
But anyway, so long story short, very shortly after that, I started dating someone, and I was kind of like, okay, good, because I don't want to go back there, because I was like, too much drama. Like it was like I need to leave the past in the past, and so I started dating someone very shortly after that incident. So, but yeah, for the first 6 months at least, I was very depressed. It was bad for a while. But yeah, how about you? How were you for the first 6 months?
I wasn't depressed.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's okay to say it.
No, I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't happy. So the common misconception between me and her and people that were around during that time is that I left her for another woman. That's not what it was. It's just another woman was there, and it allowed me.
It gave him someplace to go.
It gave me an out. Like it gave me an out. Is the most crude way I guess I could say it. But during that first 6 months, I always hated the way that it was ending. Because Faith was the first person that made me feel certain things. I don't know what. I don't know how to quantify it. I won't try to give it a word. And I knew she didn't deserve that. That's what hurt me. Faith, for all the things that she didn't or couldn't do as my wife when we were first married, I always thought she was a good person. And I never ever wanted to intentionally hurt anybody. But for some reason, the only regret and the only person I ever really truly cared about hurting was her. Because if there was a way for us to have done it for me to hurt her less, and that's kind of why I wanted to get a divorce, because I didn't want to drag it on, because my mind was so set on this other person and that potential lifestyle and that, because it was the first time I felt like somebody understood me and they filled these gaps and these pieces that I had been missing, and that made me feel good, but the piece with her made me feel bad. So there was a lot of ebbs and flows, and I completely shuttered my faith. Like, my relationship with God was almost blown up during this time, because to me, I was like, how could he put that person in my life with my wife and understand my heart? Like, why? Like, I didn't know there were certain things I just could not accept at that time. And I said, why? And I said it in counseling. I said, why would God do this? And apparently she had a conversation with that person, and that person said God put her in. Now I don't not believe that, because I believe God does things and challenges us in ways, and we don't ever want to say a tree fell on my car to show me something. Like, we don't ever want to think that God was the one who caused that to happen or whatever. But I believe that the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Just to be clear, God won't give you another woman's husband. Just to be clear, that's not a thing God would do. So she was wrong when she said that.
You're about to go into another.
Okay, go. Just keep going.
Because we gotta have it. But anyway,
I couldn't let that pass. That's not.
But anyway, totally messed up where I was going. But no, during that first 6 months, I was me. I was the most intentionally part of me, because I was just worried about me. I was worried about. There were things on the line, there were goals, there was stuff that was actually taking place and happening, and I was excited about that, but I still had this piece of me that was upset about why I left her. And
I was a ghost in his relationship with the other person.
What does that mean?
I haunted your relationship.
Oh yes, that is very true. Not only did I mention her a few times, because I have a bad habit of bringing up exes and arguments, and I'm like, this is what this person did, and this I'm I'm a doofball, but whatever. But she knew. My ex knew too, and she would say like, I don't think our relationship will be blessed because of how everything. Because despite everything, and I don't know that conversation, she would say often like, I don't like how things went. She didn't deserve that, but I wanted you to. Like it was a mind meld because there was a bunch of people. Faith was outside of this, but us two, we were just kind of like, this is not how we wanted to do this, but it was a conflict. So Faith might have thought we were somewhere having martinis and stuff.
That's
not how it was, and it was a constant struggle because I went right from my marriage into this relationship. Yeah. So there was no segue. There was no time to really get to know each other. We moved rapid. I don't know what you're about to say.
I'm not gonna say anything.
Okay, that's not part of this. But we moved very rapidly. And so I don't want to talk about the first 6 months anymore. I'll talk about the last 6 months because that's the important part. So
okay, so we made it through. I had a boyfriend, like I said, for I think it was about a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years. He was actually connected to my family, but that's another story. I thought he was a great guy. I thought, okay, well, maybe this will be like my forever guy. Turns out he said, no, that's not where we're going, and he broke up with me. I wasn't as devastated because obviously he wasn't my husband. I, at that point, had moved out of my parents' house. I was living on my own. I was able to, nothing changed really when that relationship dissolved. So, I was sad because, I really cared for him and stuff like that, and, he was a great guy, but it was just kind of okay, that's not where we're going. Okay, let's just keep stepping. But I was upset. I was upset enough that people would say the cliches, God has someone better for you. It wasn't meant to be. It was kind of every time I brought it up with someone, it was just another cliche. No one had any real advice or real no one said, hey, that sucks. Just being real. It was all kind of fluff stuff. And I don't know if it was the day or the week that I had broken up or had been broken up with, but I was you know who's not going to be fluffy? And I was Justice. During the 3 years actually that we were divorced, we periodically would text. Not about anything super crazy. I would ask about his daughter, how she was doing in school. We had some tax stuff we needed to deal with. There was just little things. So we didn't really communicate on a regular basis, but we didn't completely stop talking. So it wasn't completely out of the blue that I, did I call you or text you? I want to say text.
I don't remember.
I want to say text. So I texted him and told him, hey, my boyfriend just broke up with me.
You might have texted me and asked me to call me.
Maybe that was it, yeah. I was yeah, my boyfriend just broke up with me, and I know you're not going to,
Keynote on that. When I found out she started dating this guy, I did something I never do. I hacked her, Lord.
Stalked.
Not really stalked, but I just looked at your Facebook, and I saw pictures of them and whatever the case may be, and I was okay, she's good. And that made me feel a little bit better with my situation in regards to her. But then my situation there was a surplus of different kinds of stresses. There was a lot going on there too. So I wasn't really happy, but I could deal because there were still these foundational pieces that I was able to accept because there was a lot of great things happening. But on a person-to-person basis, it was wearing on me very heavily. But, when I saw she was dating somebody, and I was all right, he's probably a good guy for you. And I really was he's a better guy for her than me. Because I was he probably comes from a decent background and all this extra stuff. And part of it was to make me feel better, but a lot of it is I really just believed that. So when she called me and told me that he broke up, my initial reaction, and I'm sorry, listeners, oh, shit. That was just because I'm dang. Because the moment that happened, then I was and I'm the one that, because she had said stuff before about why doesn't anybody want me? Why does nobody want to marry me? Why da. And I'm It's what do you say to somebody? And I'm pretty sure there's people out here watching or listening to it, or people who felt that way before when the relationship doesn't work out. Like, why didn't this work out? And whatever the case may be. So when she called me, I was just like, okay, that's okay. And she started talking to me. So I told the girl I was with at the time, I said, hey, Faith called me. This is the situation. And she was like, okay, I'm good with it. I'm fine with it. I understand it. You guys have a history, and that was what it was at first. And then one day, me and Faith were talking, and
we talked for 3 hours.
I don't know. We don't even talk for whatever case. But I just remember something coming up, and I said I never left you because I didn't love you anymore, and she was like, what? Like, you what? And I said, yeah.
Ding 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 ding.
I said I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I said I still love you, and she's like, what? You still love me? Yeah. And she's like, oh, well, I'm gonna get you back. And I'm like, what? Wait a second. I'm in this still relation. And I'm like, I didn't want to go through anything like it happened before. Like, that ripped me apart, the divorce and everything. It didn't do the same things to me as her because I'm used to loss and stuff. Part of my history and my trauma. But I was like, I'm not trying to go down this road with you two again. It just was, no. But when she said, oh, I'm going to get you back. And there was no moving her off that point. And I was like, no, like, Kevin, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready.
No, it was funny because, like, I remember the conversation because, like, it was definitely a turning point. Like, it was one of those, like, when he said that, like, I thought I had, like, moved past it and, like, I wasn't in love with him anymore.
That's funny because she said that. As soon as I said that, she was like, well, I never really wanted anybody else other than you anyway.
Like, it was funny because I was willing to work on a relationship the first time. Like, I was willing to not get divorced and try and, like, because to me, I'm a Christian. Like, I made a vow in front of God to marry this man. And, like, to love him and work through all the BS and, like, just, he was endgame. Like, he was supposed to be endgame. So that was part of the depression, was because it was almost like a death. Like, it wasn't like a physical person died, but, like, my whole future died. So it was like, and I'm sure people probably understand that. Like, but when he said that he didn't leave me because he didn't love me anymore, it was kind of like something clicked back on. Like, I had kind of turned it off or dimmed it, I guess I could say, because, like, it was just easier because I was like, okay, we're not together. I can't, like, have feelings for him anymore. Plus, I had a boyfriend, so, like, it was easier to kind of ignore it and be like, okay, like, that's over. That chapter of my life is done. But as soon as he said it, like, that part just snapped back on, and I was like, I still love you. And it's like we had 3 years at this point to get over the divorce and, like, the pain from that, like, the initial, like, pain of, like, being cheated on and, like, going through the divorce and, like, all of that stuff. I had 3 years to get over it and, like, work through